are you already streaming?
I am going to double check that, but I just pressed play. Yep, we are up on YouTube. If you want to check the audio for me, that'd be great. So,
Getting into it right now.
okay. So thank you everyone for coming. So this is Dancing with Animatronics. Before I get started, I just want to say welcome to 2021 Virtual Christmas Summit, brought to you by Boscodio Studios. This presentation is sponsored by Gilbert Engineering. I'm going to ask that uh, please do not unmute yourself or interrupt the presenter. Um, we'll have a moment where I will address questions, and I will let Brian, our host here, kind of help me out as far as getting everyone's questions answered. Um, the topic is going to be Dancing Animatronics 2.0. This is kind of a new and improved version from the previous video I did for VCS last year. What I ran into over time is that the PVC frame worked, but it was not as strong as what we came up with Matos Designs with this new design that we're going to be working on here. It's less parts, it's more streamlined. This is available on YouTube, yes. And we'll walk through it. We'll kind of touch on a couple of topics here before we get into the build. First off, if anybody is going to be building with me, just you can comment on the chat. Otherwise, this is a great little resource to come back to. It will be available on YouTube right away, actually, right now. And Brian right now is checking the audio, and the audio is good. So let's go into this. All right, so dancing animatronics. Uh, so just a quick little thing about me. I am the exhibit engineer for Christmas in the Park. This is kind of a new job for me, but I have been doing, these are just kind of general questions that they had as the template for our VCS this year. So and I kept them in there because this is funny questions. How long have you been blinking lights? Well, my mom said I was blinking lights when I was born, but for real, 8+ years, probably even a little bit more with my dad. What do you love to do besides blinking lights? I do photography and I'm a scuba diver, dive master. Um, and this is like such a weird one. Well, name something awesome that no one else knows. I don't know if a lot of people know what I like to do, my friends, but I love collecting stuff. Currently collecting arcade and board games, kind of that COVID experience. Maybe want to get back into doing that stuff. So, and I'm not a hoarder. I want to make sure that's clear. And this little photo down here is actually one of my first props I built for a group for Burning Man, and that's actually a photo I took as well. So, Dancing Animatronics 2.0. It's build a simple rocking dancing prop using Matos Designs parts. So we're going to go over the basics, just kind of like what to look at, pivot points. We're going to talk about motor types, controllers, and then we're going to get into the build. And then if we have time, we'll talk about how you sequence the animation in X-Lights. I really touched on that on the previous video. So if you want to really get a deep dive into that process, go back to the first video that we did last year and just skip the first half and get to the sequencing part. So really quick, sequencing animations are the next, I feel like, is the next frontier for Christmas displays. We could really learn a lot really from the Christmas displays as well as Disney. Disney kind of forte or really brought animatronics into the forefront. So, and really there's endless possibilities. I really feel that way about that. So before I go on, any questions?
None in chat. You're good.
All right, great. So, all right. So, really quick, I want to talk about like animatronics. Animatronics kind of people kind of think, okay, that's that like, Lincoln, Abe Lincoln for Disney, right? That was like the first animatronic. And yes, that's an animatronic, but animatronic is in a lot of different facets of our lives. This little picture here kind of shows you that it's in almost everything that you deal with nowadays, and it has a lot of different aspects. Mechatronics is basically animatronics, and automata is also another way of just saying animatronics. They're all kind of the same term. Now we're going to talk really quick about pivot points. So what is a pivot point? So a pivot point, that's an object that rotates around, sometimes called a fulcrum point or a rotational axis. The fulcrum, the point on which a lever rests or is supported and on which it pivots. What's a lever? A rigid bar resting on a pivot, used to help move a heavy or firmly fixed load with one end when pressure is applied to the other. There's a tiny URL down there, and I'm going to keep it on the screen for just a second. And if you wanted to go to it at another time, this video was shown last year's presentation. It's basically just showing you different kind of movements you could get with a rotating motor, like a windshield wiper motor, or any kind of constantly rotating motor. Servos would work the same way, same philosophy, but I think that video really sums up what pivot points are really about and how you can kind of utilize them to get the effect that you want with animatronics. I also have a quick little video that I'll show here in a second that Tony Bigda has been sharing on a couple of the Christmas light groups, and he really is amazing inspiration to a lot of us. His dad has been kind of the guy that takes a lot of Tony's ideas and makes it really move, makes those props kind of move. So I want to show a quick little video that how he handles pivot points and how using pivot points can really get a maximum effect with even one motor. So we'll go, there's no audio in any of these presentations, by the way, so I'll kind of talk it through. So with this video, what he's showing us right now is that he's using a single AC rotisserie motor. We'll talk about motors here in a second. And what he has there is a single spacer that allows it to free move with a single camshaft or can arm that's going up to his first pivot point. From there, it attaches to his candle guy that is fixed. The point is fixed onto the candle. So when that pivot point moves up and down, it constantly rotates the arm of the candle. Now, from that single point pivot point there, it goes to another pivot point that he's pointing to. That goes to the clock arm, and the clock arm is going back and forth. Again, the pivot point is fixed onto the bottom part of the arm, and then at the top part you have the a loose connection that then goes up to another point at the top. So this whole thing is run from one single motor, just using different points, points that are either welded solid or loose. And that allows you to get full motion effects that you want and using just one motor. So it really kind of shows. I mean, I think when I first saw this idea, I would have thought two motors just to keep it simple. But with just a little bit of effort and trial and error, you can achieve something like this with just one single motor. I do know that Tony will be doing more demonstrations showing these kind of processes of how he does this work, as far as how he makes his props and how he goes about doing the animatronics as well. Those videos will be coming out, and he's also be doing some mini tours here coming up. So that is just kind of what pivot points are. If anybody has any questions? All right.
Yep. Nope. Sorry. None.
Oh, no.
Taking notes.
It's okay. All right. So now we're going to just get into motors. Okay. So these are my preferred motors, or well, 3 out of the 4 are my preferred motors. Somebody comment, I wish they sold their stuff. They're sick. Yes, yes. I think, what Tony and people like him, he's a great resource for this. And I try to inspire to get to his level eventually. But at the same time, we all kind of do things a little bit differently. And I think if we all kind of tackle it, we can learn a lot from each other. So I just want to. So basically, the DC motors are my favorite. This is a Fright Props windshield wiper motor, and then the Matos Designs DC motor. And these are kind of my go-to. The DC motor for Matos Designs, I find it doesn't have nearly as much torque as the DC motor, but it's definitely really great for light props, like a dancing prop, like we're going to be building here. So that would be my recommended motor for a prop like what we're going to be building. The two AC motors that I have here, I have this deer motor pictured on the left, and then a rotisserie motor pictured on the right. The rotisserie motor has been proven very reliable, and it's kind of the go-to for a lot of people. You just saw Tony use it for his display. Now, AC motors, I don't really, it's a preference, AC DC, right? But I would steer away from the Deer motor. You can do counterbalancing to help that motor out, but it just doesn't have the strength that the rotisserie motor has or any of the other DC motors to really move high dense pixel props. You can do it with some counterweights, and I don't have a slide about counterweights, but that's a whole nother subject. That's actually you can utilize your fulcrum points and your pivot points to get like a better balance with your prop. And at that point, you could use a Deer motor. Not, but it's never my recommendation. I'm probably pretty vocal about that. If I see somebody saying using that, I'll probably be one of the first people to say, please, if it works for you, that's great. But there's better motors out there. Somebody said you did to me. Yeah, I probably did. um, So then we're going to go over to controllers really quick. So the Pixel 2 things are kind of the go-to controllers for these kind of animated animatronic displays. Now, what I mean by sequenced animated displays, what I'm truly trying to say, most animated displays, it's just you kind of just plug it in and it runs, right? And I feel that that works, but it only takes about a few seconds until your audience member is taken away from that because they realize, oh, this isn't real. This is animated. This is not real, And when you actually sequence an animation, you can get the audience will get lost in that product. Yeah, I guess somebody's having a problem with sound.
Yeah, no, you sounded perfect on me. I did turn you up just a notch, but everything is sounding real good.
Okay, so okay, great. So what I'm trying to say is that the advantage of these controllers is that you can use software like Xlights to really control the time that your animation is going to be reacting. So for a dancing prop, you can do something like use like a singing prop, and when his mouth is moving, he could dance. Or at certain parts of the song where it really gets jiggy, you can speed him up and slow him down. And the audience members are going to get more attached to and get a little bit of suspension of disbelief, right? It's kind of a theoretical term. And that's what we're trying to really achieve with sequenced animations compared to just regular animations or regular animatronic animations. You want to get your audience, that's really the night and day of what we're showing here compared to what you would see in the Halloween side. Halloween side, for the most part, is a plug and just let it go. Now, I think what we can do in the Christmas community is creating that suspension of disbelief, and our audience members can really plug in and just get lost in so many aspects of our show. And one of them could be animated props. So my favorite is really the dancing prop. And the two motors that you have at the top here is the original Pixel 2 thins. And at the bottom here, we have the new Matos Designs Pixel 2 motor designed by David Peace. And this one is a one port, so it only runs on the red channel, the first channel of coming out of your Pixel controller. So this allows you, all these Pixel 2 things basically allow you to run pixel data through the controller, and you can do all the kind of programming and Xlights as if each one of these ports was a channel or a one of three, the red, green, and blue of your pixel. So port number 1, 2, and 3 of the Pixel 2 things is considered one light. So 3, 4, 3, 5, 6 is another light. 7, 8, 9 is another one. So the original 9-port Pixel 2 things is considered 3 pixels in X lights or any kind of software that you're using. The new Matos Designs one is going to be just one single pixel. And I also want to address controlling speed. So again, you can use software using brightness controls to control your speed. So you can use the brightness, do a state effect or a single line effect, and then control the brightness by that will control the speed of the motor. Alternatively, you can, for testing purposes, for example, or maybe you just want it to always be at a certain speed, you can use a external motor control board. There's AC and DC versions, and you can use that to dial in the speed that you want and let it go. So now we're going to get into the build here. This is the parts list. I'm going to just kind of name everything really quick and kind of discuss why some measurements don't have lengths. So you'll see that the first one is 3/4 inch or 3/4 inch EMT pipe. I don't have the length here because that's all determined by how big your prop is going to be. Now the next thing is your 1/2 inch PVC. 1/2 inch PVC or even 1/2 inch EMT could be used. The idea of the PVC is really what the dancing prop is going to be held onto, and the EMT is what you're going to use as the stake in the ground or where the motor is actually going to be attached to. The next thing you're going to want is a motor mount, and with the motor you can get a motor mount with you get a motor mouth, sorry, and you also are going to want a cam arm. Another option as well is you're going to need a cam arm extension. Matos Designs has all these parts available, and it's already cut at basically the right length for a kit like this. The other parts you're going to need is a 2 M6 by 25 millimeter screw, and that's what Matos Designs requires for their screw hole to attach the screw to the mount. We'll go into, there's a video that shows that. And then we'll have two 3/4 inch U-bolts, 3/4 inch U-bolts, and the rest are just kind of miscellaneous screws and bolts. You may need to change your bolts and screws depending on your length or how big your prop is. And then you're going to want to use some lock nuts, maybe more than 3, because you might need to use, I didn't have this problem for a prop that I've had 2 years now, but you may want to use lock nuts for the U-bolt sections. Now, the next part is just some miscellaneous washers. I put washers here. I don't think that's really a good choice. Maybe nylon spacers or hard plex pipe. You want some give. You don't want to use metal because metal on metal, you're just going to get shavings everywhere. All right, so now we're going to get into the build. I have a video that shows every single process of this build. But also we have the words to describe what we're going to be doing. But sometimes, a video says a million things, a picture, 1,000 words, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do first here, there's 2 ways to go about it, depending on how you want your prop to dance. So 1A is going to be when you want the bottom part of your prop to do the dancing. That might be a standing bulb, for example, or a Mickey dancing, or any kind of like prop that's standing up, right? So what you do is basically what you're creating the focal point or the pivot hole at the top, which is going to allow the bottom part to swing back and forth. So this is for 1A. So you're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole at one end of the EMT pipe. You're going to either want to do 3 to 4 inches down from the very end of the pipe. Drill all the way through the pipe, making sure that the 2 holes line up straight through the pipe. Don't want any crookedness, so straight through. Use a drill press, that's my tip. And this is our first pivot hole, or the only pivot hole. But again, if you want the prop to dance a different way, I'll show you how to do that. So the other option is if you want your prop to have the upper part move back up a side up, sideways, and the bottom part is your focal point. So um, if you would like your prop to move its upper body instead of the lower, it's basically the same exact process as before. Drill a 1/4 inch hole into the EMT pipe, about 24 inches. Again, this is going to be a little different depending on how big your prop is, but about 24 inches for the Boscoyo 30 inch bulb, for example. Down from the very end of the pipe, drill all the way through. Use a drill press, and this is again our pivot hole. But again, we only want one pivot hole. You're going to choose your prop either way how you're going to want it to dance. All right, so now we've done step one. You've either drilled your pivot hole at the top or the bottom or in the middle. And now we're going to drill a hole through our PVC or our 1/2 inch EMT, which is what our prop will be actually supported on. So we're going to drill a 1/4 inch hole at one end of the PVC pipe, 1 inch down from the very end. So you can see, oh, actually, I'm really sorry, everyone. So this is our first slideshow showing the where you're going to want to drill. Basically, if you wanted to have the bottom part, moving. Everyone knows how to drill looks. I'm just kind of showing you that it's that end of the pipe. Okay, and then this is the other video showing you if you were to drill kind of 24 inches down from the pipe. And if anybody's into golfing, you may notice the Anika.
Somebody loves your clamp that you're using for your drill press. Did that come with the drill press itself?
No, it's actually, you can get it at Home Depot. It's near the drill press area. They have a few different options. This was definitely one of their cheaper ones. Okay, so, and then I'll just show the PVC one really quick. So there's 2 points in the PVC pipe that you're going to drill, the one at the end, and again, about 24 inches down on the pipe as well. So I'm showing you, you got one hole, and then you got 2 holes. So it says drill all the way through the pipe. Make sure the 2 holes line up straight through the pipe. And drill one more 1/4 inch hole at the other end of the PVC pipe, this time 6 to 12 inches out from the end of the PVC pipe. All right, so now we're going to get to the U-bolt. So most U-bolts, like this 3/4 inch ones that I have here, and I know I'm not showing my webcam, but I'll show in this video, is that the threads are going to be a little too long. And so if you need to cut your threads, this is kind of the way you're going to do that. So you're going to saw off the ends of the U-bolts, leaving a 1/2 inch of the thread. A pro tip, anytime you're sawing off threads, it's always a good idea to have the nut already attached to the thread. So when you're cutting off the U-bolt, have a nut screwed on before cutting, so when you take the nut off, it straightens the threads. So you can see the nut is already attached. And as you can see, those threads are a little too long. So we're going to, and I already made like a slight cut into it, so that way I knew exactly where I wanted to cut the 1/2 inch off. Or leave a 1/2 inch. And here's me going super quick. I don't know, woo, cutting that off. And then here you can see that by doing that, it allows you to get a clean thread when you unscrew the bolt again. And at this point, I'll take any questions if anybody has any. Yeah, bolt cutter works well for that as well. That's a good call out, definitely. All right, we'll go on to the next part. Step 4. All right, so step 4, we're going to put a, this is when we're going to get this machine screws out. And depending on what kind of screws you use, you're going to see that I actually use a hook because I actually tried hanging my dancing prop in a tree. So I used the hook as a support or a place to hook it onto the tree. It worked out really well, actually. So that's a way to also take these animatronic, these moving props, and get them into different locations in your yard, not only on the ground. So put the 1/4 inch by 3, or so the length really again is something you're going to play with. Machine screw or bolt through the pivot hole. He's using a lock nut, secure the EMT spacers and PVC onto the 1/2 inch screw. And then we'll get to the screw motor. In this video, you'll see that at the same time, we're going to screw the motor onto the mount using M6 screws. So as you can see, I used a hook there, and that's at the back end. And I used a hard plex pipe, and then here's our lock nut. And you're just gonna kind of just do a slight little tight. Don't need it to be super hard at the point that the PVC starts bending, because you still want it to be free flowing. See? And now here we're going to attach the motor to our motor mount. There's a couple different ways you can go about that, and I will show that in this video, I believe. So this is one way you can mount it. And the way you're going to want to mount your motor is another way of counterbalancing your prop. So you find that maybe a setup like that is better if it's up in the tree, because that's going to keep the support straight up and down. This way it's going to be out a little bit more, so the weight is a little bit more on one side. So this is better configuration for maybe on the ground, where you can stake that EMT as supports. So that's the choice I picked for this design. And we're just going to thread the M6 threads into that, the motor mount and the motor. Give it a kind of a light tight, because the motor mount is, it's steel, but it's going to have some give to it. So don't over tighten it, because then it will actually warp the metal. You'll see that when we get to the U-bolt section, when we attach the EMT and the motor mount together. Yes, the motor does come with the plugs, and that plug is waterproof, as well as the motor. So I have 3 dancing props, and I actually have one still out in my front yard, and it's been out for almost a year and a half now. And I'll turn it on occasionally, run it, and it does fine. It's great. No, the plugs you can, yeah, if you just want to have your motor just to be on and off, yeah, you can just go straight from the motor to, well, it's DC, so you're going to use a DC power supply, but yeah, that's how you would hook it up if you wanted to do that, instead of using a Pixel 2 things. Or in Matos Designs, again, is going to have their Pixel board, and it's going to be very affordable, by the way. I think it's going to be anywhere between 30 or less dollars, to be honest with you, which is really a great entry into this hobby. Okay, so now we're going to do step 5. Line up the motor mount on the EMT pipe, making sure you have the cam arm at optimal distance and angle from the PVC. Okay, that's kind of weird wording, but I'll kind of show you. So using the U-bolts, secure the mount with the motor to the 3/4 inch EMT pipe. So I'm using kind of to kind of support. I'm seeing that, making sure it's still free flowing easily. You see the hole where the hole of the PVC pipe is. I'm lining all that up, and that's kind of where I'm going to be attaching the motor or the mount to the EMT. Get your U-bolts. And at this point, you just going to be lightly, because you're just, at this point, it's all about placement. Really quick thing about placement. So the you may not see my cursor, which is unfortunate, but I change that in a second here.
Nope, we see it, Keith.
Okay, great. So if you
Yep,
could,
we got your hand.
great. So if you could see my cursor here, so the hole right here is on the PVC. So that's where I decided that I want, and I kind of going for short throws because I don't want to be too swinging back and forth. This prop is more or less kind of closely dancing. But if you wanted to get more aggressive, just to get it, you'll see. You will
You can continue. I'll answer the questions
Okay.
that I can in the chat.
Okay. So from here, depending on how much movement you want, like if you wanted to bring this a little bit more down, and then have a bigger cam arm, you can actually have the movements go even further, bringing that motor mount and motor higher up on the pipe is going to create less of a distance here, and that way it's going to have less movements. So this is kind of a happy medium area right here. And here I'm lining up, so I got it right, doing a hand tightening. And again, just checking it's the right position. I'm also at this point checking the distance. If I go back, the distance of that spacer here. If I find that I don't have enough space to clear the cam arm and my motor, I will add a little bit more spacers here or reduce it. You want it to be pretty, you don't want it too far out. Now that we've kind of lined everything up, I'm going to turn it into an angle like this just to verify that everything is nicely lined up. It's also a little easier to tighten up the U-bolts. Constantly checking to make sure that it's the right area. And this is where we start tightening. And you don't want to, again, tighten too hard. I might have actually tightened a little bit. You can see the warping a little bit of the metal of the pipe, or see if you, but that's perfect as is. It should be, when you leave it, it should kind of stand perfect like that. Anybody have any questions? Yes, the motors are maintenance free. Yeah, they're.
Nope, I'm trying to answer them as they come. If not, I'll wait for you to
Yeah,
ask for questions.
I'll address this for people in the YouTube. So somebody's asking basically why the U-bolt had to be cut, and the U-bolt are cut so they allow the PVC pipe to move. Yeah, if you didn't cut the U-bolts, basically they would hit the PVC part, or the part that your prop is being supported. Also, you also have to think about the pixels that are on the other side of that prop too. You want to make sure you limit the amount of exposed areas that could potentially get tied up. Okay, so step 6, secure the cam arm extension to the cam arm on the motor. Matos Designs they sell their they sell their motors with an already pre-attached cam arm. The new version, in this version that you see in this video, the cam arm was welded onto the motor. Now it actually has these nice little attachments that you can actually change that cam arm out. So you cam arm onto the motor, use a 3/4 inch long screw, lock nut, and spacers. And then with the 1 inch, but 1.5 inch to like 2 inch long screw, secure the other end of the PVC to the cam arm extension. So here's our Plex or nylon spacer. Here's a bolt. Make sure that if you have if you find yourself having problems getting to that section, you turn the motor on, give it some basic 12 volt or 5 volt DC power. You can get some, everyone has those wall warts, right? And you can just, give it a little bit of power and get that, the cam arm will then move to a better area that you can get that access to. You do not want to put force on that cam arm without it being powered. And oop, oop, sorry guys. So what I was going to try to say here is that you're not, again, you don't have to over tighten a lot of this stuff, but you don't want it to be too loose. So lock nuts are key at this point too. My God, I keep pressing the wrong button. I apologize, everyone. Um, so I didn't use a lock nut on the U-bolts, but they are not, the new Matos Designs boards are not available yet. They will be available soon. So you can use a lock nut on the U-bolts. I think using lock nuts on animatronics in general is a good idea. Lock nut washer. There's a couple a couple different ways to do it, but that's always a good idea for anything that's going to be moving. So again, I'm checking the movements. Is this the movement I want? Because this is at the point that like I still can go back and change the U-bolts where it's on the EMT. I can change the cam arm at this point. Anything at this point, this is the point where you need to figure out how much movement I want and if the movement is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm just kind of just doing a quick little run. Put in the spacers because I had to put a spacer, just a tiny little one, a plex, just to get a little bit more of a space between the cam arm, the arm, and all those U-bolts and everything. Again, because of pixels in the back, I was a little afraid of the wires. So it's coming out probably a good inch from the distance of the EMT and the PVC. There's a space of about an inch or more. Using lock nut. And again, you don't want to get to the point that the PVC is bending, but you do want that point to be pretty strong too. But again, we're just gonna give it a little tug to make sure it's good. And this cam arm I made myself. You can make your own cam arms as well using just regular straight metal tubing or flat metal pipe, or you know what I'm trying to say, that you can get at Home Depot, like a, or you can actually find what Tony does. I think is he actually uses mattress frames that you can find on like the side of the road sometimes, or bed frames. Any scrap metal really. All right, and then that's really it. At this point, all you're really going to be doing, you're going to slide the EMT into the ground, or hey, hook it up on your favorite tree, and you're going to secure your prop to the PVC. There's different ways you could do it. You can use the easy mounts. I use EMT mounts. And then at that point, you got a dancing prop. And that's kind of what it looks like. There's a little bit of PVC there. You can always chip that off later. And that's kind of how you create dancing animatronic props. And I went really quick.
Excellent presentation. I would like to have you reiterate the speed of the motor. Is it the brightness in X lights or on the controller?
Yes. So okay. So I prefer to do the speed control on in the software. But again, I mentioned earlier that you can always use an external motor control, either a DC or AC version, to dial down the speed that you initially want. And then you can even go back into your software and do the speed again. But those are the two ways I do it. I usually 9 out of 10 times I'll just do it all on X lights. You can use the brightness setting in X lights to dial in the speed of the motor.
And K Bear has a question. K Bear, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
yep,
Oh,
now we got you.
okay. Oh, hey, Brian, this is Kevin. Uh, Keith, you mentioned that you had a prop that was out in your yard for 3 years. Are you field testing the motor or what? Why?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and what, can you explain how, and exactly which motor it is? So that way we can.
Yeah, no, it's the Matos design motor. For the last 2 years, I've had it out on my display. And you can also look. JR was on the Great Christmas Light Fight, and he had the dancing bulbs as well. We collaborated and worked on that for his display, and those were out for a long time as well. Um, a lot of these motors, they're designed to take the elements, and I can really say definitively that that motor especially can really handle the elements for multiple years. I'm in sunny California, so I'm not getting the snow, but I imagine it would handle the snow just fine. It's really the only point of failure is that connection, the the power connection. But he uses a actually the same type of connection you would use in your car, so it can handle all that. Yeah, California poo. But uh, so what else we got here? That was a great question. Hopefully I answered that. Do you recommend using relays or anything for powering the motors? Um, when I'm testing, I will usually use like a 5 volt wall wart because these motors you can either provide 12 volts or 5 volts. That's just going to change the RPMs or the rotations of the motor, the speed. So if you give it 5 volts, it's basically going to cut it even more than half of the speed than a 12 volt will. So when I'm usually kind of testing a prop, I'll throw a little 5 volts and again, I prefer DC, so that's what I'm talking about wall warts. And from there you can dial in how your prop's going to move, and then after that I'll hook it up to like a controller like a Pixel 2 Thins board. Relays, to if you want it just to go on and off, yeah, relays, there's a lot of different tutorials that do that. Yes, PWMs is another way of controlling wiper motors. That's actually how most of those speed controllers are used. That's how you control speed of DC motors. And the Pixel 2 things, that's just another way of accomplishing that same thing.
Hey Keith,
Yes.
for the relay question, I was kind of more concerned with power. If I'm connecting it to like the Pixel to Themes board,
Mm-hmm.
is I'm using that one power supply there. Would it be better to use the Pixel to Themes to send whatever signal to trigger a relay and have different props have different motors with their own power supply, or does that not really matter?
No, that's the um yeah, if you were using the default board, there definitely is a limit of how many amps you can push through that board. Um, but that's a really great question. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't worry too much about that. um, I think if you need to power your board externally, yeah, I think the relay is going to have to do it. But that's a little bit more advanced than I really want to discuss on this forum. Relays, you can use relays to do a lot of things with the Pixel 2 things. We started working on props that basically you can get to the point where you can have a prop laid down on the ground. So you have a system where the prop, sits down, and then when you want it to get activated, it can plop right back up. And then so that's an ace. We use a relay to do that motion because we just want it to hit a motion, then hit a um, basically a trigger to stop that motion, and then we're going to use the rest of the Pixel 2 things to do our back and forth, the movements, our dancing, and then we'll use the relay again to create that action going back down to the ground. Yes, wiper motor, 12 volt wiper motors are traditionally more into the 6 to 12 volt section. And yeah, it's also all about amps as well. So, a lot of the wall warts are really only like one or so amps. So you do have to kind of get one of the like, you know, the iPad ones that are usually around like 3 amps or so. Oh, I like Todd actually talked about the pop in the Jack in the Box car motors. Yeah. No, I do 3 motors off of my Pixel 2 things right now, and I'm not having any issues. Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't, you know, I don't, I think it's 10 amps, I believe, is what he has it set to. You might be able to change the fuse to get 15 amps, but I think that's about as high you can go. The information, I should not say, I would always recommend checking the Pixel 2 Things board specifications. Um, that's why I really feel like the Matos Designs boards are going to be so great because, you know, I'm not going to always have these props in the same location. I'm going to spread them out. So I don't want to, you know, using a 1 Pixel 2 Things board and I'm only using 3 outputs or 2 outputs. It's just, I don't know. I really would love a 3-port version, or now we have the Matos Designs 1-port version, which is just exactly what we need. Yeah, you can also always go to like a junkyard and you can actually pull out um, windshield wipers from the junkyard. Those ones work just as well. Yeah, somebody's recommending a 12 volt, 5 amp power supply from Amazon to control the motors, and then using a PWM to control the speed. Um, yeah, you can search PWM controller or just DC controller as well. But again, that's not sequencing your animatronics. That's just turn on and off. And I really feel like this step really makes a night and day animatronic effect is that, you know, the being able to sequence it with the rest of your lights. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes nowadays the junkyard to pull out is just extremely expensive. Yeah, you're gonna not gonna get you're not gonna get nearly the amount of speed. Like I said, if you use 5 volts, it's gonna cut it more than half, and that might not be strong enough. You might not get enough torque to move your prop, but you can change. You could get more torque out of your pivot points, right? By bringing that prop up, or that motor mount up higher in the EMT, which is going to make it less of a sway. And there's also counterbalancing you could play with as well. I would use the state effect in X Lights. So in X Lights, you would set up your Pixel 2 things as a single string of 3 lights if you're using the Pixel 2 things, or if you were using Matos Designs, you would use either the state or block channels or a single line and one single pixel. And then from there, in X Lights in the sequence, you then, you know, you have those models, the single line Pixel 2 things, and then you would add a state effect or even just a single line effect, and then you're just going to define a color depending on what port you're trying to control. So you can dive into the node after you have your model set up in the sequencer. You could dive into the node level, and you can then you know, automatically, if you put an on effect, for example, or onto that node, it's going to know, hey, this light is the red part of the pixel. So if you put the on and you do white or red, that's when that motor, that port 1 will get activated. And so to control the speed or the movement at that point is you're just going to go into the brightness settings in X Lights to control the speed of your motor. And at that point, you could do all kinds of you know, going in and out, fades and stuff like that, and that controls the speed as well. It's really important that you, in the controller itself, that port that the Pixel 2 things attached to, don't change the brightness there. That needs to be 100%. You're only changing the brightness in the sequence. Another really good thing about, just a side thing, the other really good thing about the Pixel 2 things is it has a DC out, and it's a lot easier than a lot of other Pixel controllers because it's basically, you can define it, either you can chain pixels off of the Pixel 2 things, because it could be daisy chained. You could either have pixels in front of the Pixel 2 things or the pixels after the Pixel 2 things. And but if you don't want to add a chain of pixels on the output of the Pixel 2 things, you can use that same output as the DC. So you'll define the last 10, 11, 12 channel off of the Pixel 2 things will be your DC. Or DMX. I'm sorry, DMX. Power supply question. Which one was that? Ben's question. Most of my display is 5 volts, and I would like to just use 5, so I don't have to add 5-volt supply. So what? Yeah, you could still use the 12. Again, you're just not going to get nearly the rotational speed. It's literally going to cut your RPMs in more than half. I don't know if I've addressed all the questions. We do have 10 more minutes, or 9.
I believe so. I've been kind of paying close attention. I don't know the YouTube because it was on my phone, so I don't know what questions you would have there. But
we'll
yeah,
check.
You've been doing real good, Keith. You got 8 more minutes, so.
Yes, slower with 5 volts, definitely. More than half. All the questions. We do have 10 more minutes. We are not hearing the questions. That was the only question on the YouTube.
Oh,
but
yeah, because we're reading them off.
Yeah. So if you're listening to YouTube, people are typing the questions out, and we're just reading them off the chat. So you're not missing anything on YouTube. Yeah, you can also, that's a good one, Sean, that good call out. You can also get a step up. So you can get a 5 to 12 volt step up. And that way you can still use a 12. I have no experience off of that myself personally, but that sounds sound advice to me. Worth trying, because I don't think a step up would be that much more money. But yeah, you can use that. You can still use the 5 volts and use a step up to get to your 12 volts to the motor, to get that same RPMs, the rotations, the speed that you want. There is no kits right now, but the Matos Designs are working on all kinds of animatronic kits that will be available, and this will be one of the first ones. And then we got a bunch of other really cool ones hopefully coming out soon. Brian, do you want to address that question?
I was writing some stuff down. Yes, on Monday they are going to be there. They're going to be on the site. If you go to the Facebook page, we're having a promo there as well. So, but yeah, the full kits will be listed on Monday. And they're going to have the board, motor, extensions. What am I missing?
Cam. Yep. Yeah. So I think I'm going to stop the stream here in a second. Thank well, one last little slide I have to thank our sponsor today again. Thank you, Gilbert Engineering, for sponsoring this presentation. And that's it. So I thank you all very much for coming. I hope this was a little bit more to the build aspect compared to the previous video. And if you have any more questions about how X-Lights, how do you really control the speed of the motor, or how you set up Pixel 2 things, go back to last year's video, fast forward to about the end of it, and we address all that. I actually go into X-Lights. I figured I didn't really know about our time, and I wanted this to be purely about the prop itself, the building this prop. These videos will be available. They are available on YouTube, and